In the hospital's operating room, a millionaire doctor prepares for the most important surgery of his life, saving his own 8-year-old son who is in critical condition. With a tense face and scalpel in hand, about to make the first cut, a little 6-year-old beggar girl bursts into the room screaming, "Sir, don't start the surgery." The doctor freezes, completely shocked. How did a street child get past all the security barriers? 7 minutes later, something unbelievable happens, and screams of despair echo throughout the hospital. The scalpel felt like a mountain in Dr. Edward Miller's trembling hand. At 42, he'd performed over 3,000 cardiac surgeries, each executed with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. His reputation was impeccable, his hands considered. Blessed by his colleagues, and his emotional detachment in the operating room was legendary. But today, facing the table where his 8-year-old son Peter lay, that detachment had morphed into pure terror. The halogen lights of the city's most advanced surgical center bathed the room in a harsh, unforgiving glow. The heart monitor emitted irregular beeps, echoing the severe arrhythmia that had caused Peter to collapse 3 days earlier during school recess. An arrhythmia that had struck out of nowhere, like a bolt from the blue, felling the boy in the middle of a soccer game with his classmates. Edward took a deep breath, trying to regain the control that had always defined him. The medical team around him waited in respectful silence. Dr. Sarah Evans, his most trusted assistant for 10 years, watched him with poorly concealed concern. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Robert Franklin, had already prepped Peter for the procedure, and the boy slept soundly, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. The room was in perfect order, every instrument in its designated place, every piece of equipment functioning in technological harmony. The ventilation system whispered softly, maintaining the sterile environment. Everything was exactly as it should be for an arrhythmia correction surgery, a procedure Edward mastered like few others in the country. But nothing was as it should be. The patient was his son, the child he had held in his arms the day he was born, promising to protect him forever. The same boy whose first steps he had missed because he was at an international medical conference. The same child whose tears he had rarely wiped, always too busy with his ascending career. Edward closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the call he'd received 3 days prior. The school principal's voice, trembling and apologetic, informing him that Peter had collapsed in the schoolyard. His world had caved in at that instant. For the first time in his career, Dr. Edward Miller had cancelled all scheduled surgeries and rushed to the hospital like a desperate father, not the renowned surgeon he was. In the 3 days that followed, he had studied every test, consulted the country's top specialists, and reviewed surgical protocols to exhaustion. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Peter needed complex surgery to correct a congenital malformation that, inexplicably, had only manifested now. A rare condition that few surgeons in the United States had the experience to treat, and he was one of those few. The irony was cruel. The man who had dedicated his entire life to saving other people's children now had to save his own. His hands, which never trembled, now seemed incapable of firmly holding the scalpel. His mind, always crystal clear during procedures, was clouded by the emotion he had tried to suppress his whole life. Sarah approached discreetly. "Doctor, are you all right? We can wait a few more minutes if you need to." Edward shook his head, straightening his shoulders. He couldn't fail. Not now. Peter depended on him, and he wouldn't let emotions compromise the necessary technical precision. He took another deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders as he never had before. The scalpel neared Peter's delicate chest. This would be the decisive moment. The first incision of a surgery that would determine if his son had a future or if... Edward pushed the grim thought away. He focused on the anatomy, the years of training, the expertise that had made him the most respected surgeon in the city. His hands finally stopped trembling. It was then that the operating room door burst open violently, and a desperate cry echoed through the sterile room. "Mr. Doctor, don't start the surgery." Time stopped in the surgical center. Edward turned, sharply, scalpel still in hand, as his eyes tried to process the impossible scene before him. A girl, about 6 years old, with tattered clothes and bare, dust-covered feet, stood at the entrance of the sterile room, breathless and with tears streaming down her dirty face. "How the hell?" Sarah murmured, completely stunned. Hospital. Security was strict, especially in the surgical wing. There were 3 doors with different codes, metal detectors, and a 24-hour surveillance team. It was impossible for a child, especially a street kid, to get this far. The girl took another step closer, extending her small, trembling hands. "Please, Mr. Doctor, you can't operate now. I saw the man in the white lab coat do something bad." Edward lowered the scalpel, his mind torn between his son's medical urgency and the absolute strangeness of the situation. He looked at Sarah, who had already discreetly pressed the security button. In seconds, 2 guards appeared at the door. "Wait," Edward said, raising his hand. Something in the girl's desperate expression made him hesitate. There was a raw sincerity in her brown eyes, an urgency that went beyond fear or confusion. "How did you get in here, little one?" The girl wiped her nose on the sleeve of her torn t-shirt. "I live on the streets, mister. I know all the ways in. When the men in uniforms aren't looking, I slip through the cracks they don't see." Robert, the anesthesiologist, quickly checked Peter's monitors. "Dr. Miller, we can't waste much time. Vitals are stable, but we need to proceed." "I know, Robert." Edward knelt to the girl's eye level, studying her face. There was something familiar about her, though he was sure he'd never seen her before. "How do you know my name? And what exactly did you see?" The girl sniffled, wiping her nose again. "I always hang around here, mister. I ask for food at the hospital door. Everyone here knows me, but they pretend they don't see me." Her voice was small but firm. "3 days ago, I saw a man in a lab coat put white powder in the food that was going to the school, your boy's school." Edward's heart leaped. "What man? How do you know it was for my son's school?" "Because I heard him talking to himself. He said the school's name, and he said he was going to make the doctor feel the same pain he feels." The girl shivered, hugging herself. "Then he went to the hospital's sub-basement. I followed him and saw him messing with the electrical wiring." Sarah and Robert exchanged alarmed glances. Edward felt a chill run down his spine. Peter's arrhythmia had started shortly after snack time at school. A coincidence? Or could you recognize this man? Edward asked, his voice lower. The girl nodded vigorously. He had dark hair and a mark on his face here. She pointed to her own left cheek. And he limped on his right leg. Edward closed his eyes for a moment. The description matched someone he knew, but he didn't want to believe it. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Doctor," Sarah whispered, "what do we do? We can't operate with this possibility hanging over us." "But we can't not operate either," Robert added. "Every minute counts." The girl moved closer, lightly touching Edward's arm. "Mr. Doctor, the man said he was going to make the lights go out too. He said he wanted to see you suffer in the dark like he suffered." Before Edward could respond, the operating room lights flickered once, then twice. The monitors emitted a momentary warning beep before returning to normal. "That's not normal," Sarah murmured, checking the emergency systems. Edward looked at the girl, then at his unconscious son on the operating table, then back at the child, who had burst into his life at the most crucial moment. His rational mind fought against a growing sense that something much larger and more sinister was happening. "What's your name, little one?" he asked softly. "Anna," she replied, wiping away another tear. "Anna Page, but everyone just calls me Anna." "Anna, are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" She nodded with such conviction that Edward felt his world begin to crumble in a completely different way. If the girl was right, Peter's illness wasn't accidental. It was part of a revenge plot. And if she was right about the electrical wires, they were all about to find out how far someone was willing to go to make Edward Miller pay for something he didn't yet fully comprehend. The lights flickered again, staying off for 2 whole seconds before returning. Anna gripped Edward's arm. "Tighter. Mister, you have to believe me. The bad man is going to come back." Edward felt the crushing weight of the decision on his shoulders. On one hand, his son urgently needed surgery. On the other, a street kid was making accusations that, if true, completely changed the nature of the situation. He looked at Peter's monitors, which showed stable vitals for now, but he knew that could change quickly. "Sarah, call the head of security immediately," Edward ordered, his voice regaining some of its usual authority. "I want a complete check of all the hospital's electrical systems, especially the OR." "Doctor, that could take hours," Robert protested gently. "And Peter—" "I know my son's condition very well," Edward cut in, harsher than he intended. He took a deep breath, trying to control his emotions. "Sorry, Robert. It's just, if this child is right, operating now might be exactly what our saboteur wants." Anna remained beside the operating table, watching Peter with a protective expression that deeply touched Edward. It was strange to see this small, ragged girl showing so much concern for a child she didn't know. "Anna." Edward knelt again to her level. "Tell me more about this man. When exactly did you see him?" The girl frowned, concentrating. "It was Monday, mister. Early in the morning when I was looking for food near the school. He arrived in a black car and waited near the gate." Edward quickly did the math. Monday had been exactly 3 days before Peter's collapse. "And you're sure he put something in the food?" "Yes. He had a small bag, and when no one was looking, he poured the powder into the snacks that were going to be delivered. Then he put the bag in his lab coat pocket." Anna opened her eyes, staring intently at Edward. "I know it was wrong, mister, but I was very hungry and thought about asking him for food. That's why I kept watching him." Sarah returned with the head of security, a tall, serious man named Marcus Thorne. "Dr. Miller, we've just done a preliminary check. We found evidence that someone was in the sub-basement last night." Edward's heart raced. "What kind of evidence?" "To cut wires in the main electrical system, but intelligently done. Whoever did this knows the hospital's layout well. The cuts were made so the system would function normally until overloaded." Marcus consulted his notes. "We also found footprints and a discarded tool. Someone was down there preparing something." Edward felt as if the floor were disappearing beneath his feet. Anna was right. Someone had meticulously planned all this. "Marcus, I need to see the security footage from the last 3 days." "Already on it, Doctor. But there's something else." Marcus hesitated. "The backup power system has also been sabotaged. If the main power fails, we'll be without lights for at least an hour." Robert rechecked Peter's monitors. "Dr. Miller, we can't operate without guaranteed power. It's too risky." Edward ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility. As a doctor, he knew Peter needed the surgery. As a father, he was terrified of something going wrong. And now, as a possible victim of a revenge plot, he faced a situation completely beyond his control. "Anna, you said you saw the man talking to himself. Do you remember anything else he said?" Edward asked, kneeling beside the girl. She frowned, concentrating intensely. He was talking about a girl. He said she died because a doctor wouldn't help, and that now he was going to make that doctor feel the same pain. Edward felt his blood run cold. A vague memory began to form in his mind, something from the past he had tried to forget. A situation in another hospital years ago, when he was still building his career. "Mr. Doctor," Anna continued, "the man also talked about money. That rich doctors only care about money and don't care about poor people." The memory became clearer. Edward remembered a specific case about 5 years ago when he worked at a private hospital. A girl needed urgent heart surgery, but her family, who couldn't afford it. He had been approached to do the procedure pro bono, but Edward closed his eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. He had refused. At the time, he was focused on establishing his reputation and couldn't afford to do many free surgeries. He had suggested they try the public system, knowing full well the waiting lists were long, and the girl would likely not survive the wait. "Doctor," Sarah touched his arm gently. "Are you all right?" Edward opened his eyes, meeting Anna's worried gaze. Suddenly, he understood why there was something familiar about her. It wasn't her face he recognized, but her expression. The same desperate expression he had seen on that girl's father years ago. The lights flickered again, this time staying off for 5 full seconds. When they returned, everyone in the operating room knew time was running out in more ways than one. Edward looked at Peter, then at Anna, and finally at his medical team. A terrible decision awaited him, and he was beginning to suspect that no matter what he chose, someone very determined was prepared to make this day the worst of his life. The operating room lights flickered once more, and this time Edward could feel that something definitive was about to happen. Marcus, the head of security, spoke urgently into his radio with the technical team in the sub-basement, while Sarah obsessively checked all equipment connected to the emergency system. "Anna," Edward called to the girl, who hadn't left the side of the table where Peter rested. "You said you followed the man to the sub-basement. Can you show me exactly where he tampered with the wires?" The girl nodded immediately. "I can, Mr. Doctor. I know every corner of this hospital. Sometimes I sleep down there when it's too cold on the street." Marcus approached. "Dr. Miller, it would be very helpful to have someone who knows the sub-basement well. Our architectural plans are almost 10 years old, and several modifications have been made since then." Edward looked at Peter, whose breathing remained stable under anesthesia. Every fiber of his being as a father screamed not to leave the boy alone for even a second, but as a doctor, he knew that discovering the extent of the sabotage was crucial to ensuring the surgery could be performed safely. "Sarah, you stay here with Peter. Monitor every beat, every breath. Robert, keep the anesthesia stable. If anything happens, any change in vitals, call me immediately on the radio." Sarah touched his arm gently. "Edward, are you sure about this, leaving Peter now?" "I know what I'm doing," he replied, though he wasn't so sure himself. "If we don't find out what this man did, Peter could be in much greater danger than—" "If I leave for a few minutes—" Anna was already heading for the door. "Let's go, Mr. Doctor. I know the quickest way." In the hospital corridors, Edward noticed how Anna moved with the agility of someone who truly knew every corner of the place. She avoided the busiest areas, guiding him through service passages he didn't even know existed. Marcus followed them, impressed by the girl's knowledge of the building's structure. "How did you learn all these paths, Anna?" Edward asked as they descended a rarely used emergency staircase. "When you don't have a home, mister, you need to know all the places where you can hide or protect yourself." Her voice was naturally sad, but not self-pitying. This hospital has always been good to me. People sometimes give me food, and the guards aren't too strict when it rains. Edward felt a pang of guilt. How many times had he passed children like Anna at the hospital entrance and simply ignored them, too focused on his own commitments to see their humanity? In the sub-basement, Anna led them through a labyrinth of pipes and electrical cables to a specific area where several main wires were exposed. Marcus immediately turned on his flashlight and began examining the damage. "My God," he muttered. "This was done by someone who knows hospital electrical systems very well. Look here, Doctor." He pointed to precise cuts in specific cables. Whoever did this knew exactly which wires to cut to cause a cascading failure. Anna approached a darker area. "This is where I saw the man. He had a small flashlight and was cutting the wires very carefully. He was also talking to himself." "What else did he say, Anna? Try to remember every word." The girl closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. "He said he'd waited a long time for this. That finally the rich doctor would know what it's like to lose someone important, and that—" She hesitated. "Go on, little one, it's very important." "He said that when the lights went out, he would enter the hospital dressed as a technician and finish what he started, that he would make it look like an accident during the surgery." Edward felt his blood run cold. The plan was even more elaborate than he had imagined. It wasn't just about making Peter sick and driving Edward to despair. It was about killing Peter during the surgery, making it look like medical malpractice. Marcus's radio crackled. "Marcus, this is dispatch. We have a problem. We've identified a man trying to enter the hospital posing as an electrical company technician. He has all the apparently legitimate documents, but something seems suspicious." Edward and Marcus exchanged alarmed glances. "Physical description?" Marcus asked quickly. "Male, approximately 40 years old, dark hair, scar on his left cheek, limps slightly on his right leg." Anna grabbed Edward's arm. "It's him, Mr. Doctor, it's the man I saw." Edward spoke into the radio. "Marcus, this is Dr. Miller. That man is dangerous. Do not let him enter the hospital under any circumstances, and send a team to the OR immediately." "Received, Doctor. But I must inform you that he already entered the building 5 minutes ago. We're trying to locate him." At that exact moment, the sub-basement lights went out completely. The darkness was total and absolute. The emergency system, sabotaged as Marcus had discovered, didn't work. In the darkness, Edward heard Anna's frightened voice very close. "Mr. Doctor," he said when it got dark, he was going to come up to finish what he started. "We need to get back to your boy, now." Edward understood with horrifying clarity that Peter was alone in the operating room, unconscious and vulnerable, while a man determined to get revenge was heading straight there, in the midst of the darkness he himself had created. The darkness of the sub-basement was suffocating. Edward tried to control the panic that threatened to overwhelm him completely. His son was up there, unconscious and unprotected, while a man motivated by revenge headed to the operating room with deadly intentions. "Anna, can you guide us back in the dark?" Edward asked, his voice tense. "Yes, Mr. Doctor. I know this. Way even with my eyes closed." Her small hand found his in the darkness. "Follow my voice and keep your hand on the wall." Marcus switched on his radio's emergency flashlight, creating a small circle of light. "We'll have to move fast, but carefully. A fall here could delay us even more." They began to climb the emergency stairs, Anna leading with an impressive confidence for a 6-year-old. Edward could hear his own ragged breathing echoing off the concrete walls, mixed with the distant sound of shouts and confusion from the upper floors of the hospital. "Mr. Doctor," Anna said as they climbed, "the bad man had a backpack when I saw him in the sub-basement. Inside, there were shiny things that looked like doctor's tools." Edward felt a chill down his spine. Medical instruments. The saboteur intended to use surgical instruments themselves to make it look like Peter had died from a medical error during the operation. Marcus's radio crackled with interference. Marcus! This is dispatch, lost contact, or team. The interference is too strong, Marcus muttered, shaking the device. He must have sabotaged the communication systems too. When they finally reached the ground floor, the hospital was in controlled chaos. Nurses and doctors moved with makeshift flashlights, trying to keep patients calm. Some emergency generators had been started in critical areas, but most of the building remained dark. Anna, what's the quickest way to the OR? Edward asked urgently. This way, mister. Anna ran ahead, moving through the confusion with feline agility. Edward and Marcus followed her, pushing past confused nurses and frightened patients. On the third floor, they found two security guards with flashlights trying to maintain order. Did you see a suspicious man pass through here? Marcus asked quickly. Yes, a few minutes ago. Said he was an electrical maintenance technician, had an ID badge and everything, so we let him pass. He went towards the OR. Edward felt his heart skip a beat. How long ago? About 3 minutes. Anna tugged Edward's sleeve. Mister, if he arrived 3 minutes ago and knows the hospital, he must be there already. They ran through the dark corridors, Edward occasionally stumbling over. Equipment left in the hallways during the emergency evacuation. With every passing second, he imagined horrific scenarios of what might be happening to Peter. As they approached the operating room, Edward saw a faint light leaking from under the door. Someone had connected a portable generator inside. He could hear voices, including Sarah's, but couldn't make out the words. Stay behind me, Marcus whispered, drawing his service weapon. If he's armed with surgical instruments, Edward grabbed Marcus's arm. No, Peter's in there. Any stray shot? Anna stepped forward. Let me, misters. I'm small, and he doesn't see me as a threat. I can go in and see what's happening. Absolutely. And not, Edward protested. You're a child. I'm a child who lives on the streets, Mr. Doctor. I know how to hide, and I know when there's danger. Anna looked at him with determination. Your boy needs help now. I can help. Before Edward could protest again, Anna had already moved silently towards the slightly ajar door. Edward and Marcus followed her, staying in the shadows. Through the crack in the door, they could see the scene in the operating room. A man in a lab coat, exactly as Anna had described, stood beside the table where Peter lay unconscious. Sarah and Robert were pressed against the wall, clearly under threat. Dr. Miller was always so proud of his precision, the man was saying, his voice full of bitterness. Let's see how he feels when he finds out his precious son died from an unavoidable medical error. Edward recognized the voice. It was Michael Sullivan, an ex-specialized nurse who had worked at the hospital until 6 months ago. A brilliant man who had been fired for negligence after an error cost a patient's life. Michael held a scalpel, bringing it dangerously close to Peter's chest. It'll look like Dr. Edward Miller, the perfect surgeon, finally made the fatal mistake that ruined his own family. Anna whispered in Edward's ear, Mister, I'll distract him. When he looks at me, you guys come in. Before Edward could stop her, Anna pushed the door open and entered the operating room, shouting, Uncle Michael, don't do it. Michael whirled, around, surprised, and in that moment, Edward understood there was much more to this story than he had imagined. Anna knew the saboteur by name, and from the way she had called him Uncle, there was a personal connection that changed everything completely. Time seemed to freeze in the operating room. Michael Sullivan spun around sharply at the sound of Anna's voice, the scalpel still in his trembling hand. His expression shifted from cold determination to absolute shock upon seeing the little girl standing at the room's entrance. Anna? What? How did you get here? Michael stammered, slightly lowering the surgical instrument. His voice, once filled with controlled bitterness, now trembled with confusion and something that looked like pain. Edward seized the moment of distraction to silently enter the operating room. Followed by Marcus, Sarah and Robert remained motionless against the wall, their eyes darting between Anna and the man holding them hostage. "Uncle Michael, please stop this," Anna said, her small voice firm despite her visible fear. "I know. You're in a lot of pain, but hurting this boy won't bring her back." Edward felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. "Her?" he murmured, beginning to grasp a terrible connection he hadn't realized before. Michael looked directly at Edward, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "You don't even remember, do you? To you, it was just another refusal, another poor family you ignored." "Michael, Edward began, but the ex-nurse cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Beth Sullivan, 8 years old, complex congenital heart disease, came to City General 5 years ago begging for a surgery that would save her life." Michael swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "You were the only surgeon in the city capable of performing that specific operation." The memory hit Edward like a punch to the gut. He remembered now, with painful clarity. A desperate man pleading in the corridors of the private hospital where Edward practiced at the time, a small, fragile girl with the same brown eyes as... Edward looked at Anna, and the pieces of the puzzle slammed together with devastating force. "Anna is my niece," Michael completed, a tear tracing a path down his face. "Daughter of my younger sister Beth, the girl who died because you said you didn't have time for charity cases." Anna moved closer, extending her small hands towards Michael. "Uncle, I know you still miss Mommy so much. I do too. But Mommy wouldn't want you to hurt other people because of her." Robert whispered quietly to Sarah. "What do we do now? This situation just got a lot more complicated." Edward felt the crushing weight of guilt descend upon him. 5 years ago, his refusal to perform a free surgery had killed this girl's mother. And now, Anna, who should hate him more than anyone in the world, had risked her own safety to save Peter. "Why did you warn me about the danger?" Edward asked Anna, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did you save my son when I didn't save your mother?" Anna wiped her nose on the sleeve of her tattered t-shirt, a gesture Edward had seen several times that terrible night. "Because Uncle Michael taught me that 2 people suffering isn't better than 1 person suffering, and because..." She hesitated, looking at Peter unconscious on the table. "I know what it's like not to have a mom. I don't want this boy to know what it's like not to have a dad." Michael let out a sob, the scalpel trembling even more violently in his hand. "Anna, you don't understand. This man let your mother die. He had the power to save her and chose to do nothing." "I do understand, Uncle Michael. I understand Dr. Miller did a very bad thing. A very, very bad thing." Anna took another step towards her uncle. "But if you hurt Peter, you'll be doing the same bad thing. And then what will Mommy think of us up in heaven?" Edward watched the scene, his heart breaking. This 6-year-old girl, who had lost her mother because of him, who lived on the streets begging for food, was demonstrating more wisdom and compassion than he had shown in his entire medical career. Marcus shifted his position, ready to act if necessary, but Edward signaled him to wait. Something was happening here that went far beyond a simple hostage situation. "Michael," Edward said softly, "you're right. I failed your sister. I failed as a doctor and as a human being. There's no excuse for what I did." Michael stared at him, surprised by the direct admission. "But Anna is right too," Edward continued. "Killing Peter won't bring Beth back. It will only create more pain, more suffering, and it will make Anna a complete orphan." "Orphan?" Michael asked, confused. Anna lowered her head. "Uncle Michael, if you go to jail for hurting someone, I'll be all alone for real. You're the only family I have left." Edward saw the exact moment Michael's determination began to crumble. The man looked at Anna, then at Peter, then at the scalpel in his hand, but it was at that moment that the lights flickered again and a medical alarm began to sound. Peter was having a complication, and Michael still held the scalpel. The medical alarm cut through the tense air of the operating room, like an emergency siren. Edward saw Peter's monitors flashing red, indicating severe arrhythmia. His son was in cardiac arrest. "Michael, for God's sake," Edward shouted, rushing towards the operating table. "He's dying. You got what you wanted, but now you need to let me save him." Michael recoiled, still holding the scalpel, but his expression changed completely as he saw the monitors. The ex-nurse knew those signs all too well. Peter was literally dying before his eyes. "No!" Anna cried, running to the table where Peter lay. "Peter, wake up, please, wake up!" Edward reached Peter's side and immediately began chest compressions, his hands working automatically despite the despair he felt. "Sarah, prep the defibrillator. Robert, check his airway." But it was Michael who moved first. Without hesitation, he dropped the scalpel and ran to the defibrillator, powering it on with the efficiency of someone who had done it hundreds of times. "Dr. Miller, clear. I'm charging to 200 joules. For a surreal moment, Edward hesitated. This was the man who had come to kill his son, but he was also a trained medical professional, and Peter needed all the help he could get. "Charging!" Michael announced, positioning the paddles. "Everybody clear!" The electric shock made Peter's small body convulse. Everyone looked at the monitor, waiting. Nothing. The line remained flat. "Again!" Edward shouted, resuming compressions. "Anna, step back, honey!" But Anna didn't move. Instead, she held Peter's hand with her small, dirty hands. "Peter, you have to be okay. I promised your mommy I'd take care of you." Edward paused for a second, confused. "Anna, you never met Peter's mother." Anna looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Yes, I did, Mr. Doctor. She always came here to the hospital when Peter was little. One time she gave me food and said Peter was the most important thing in her life. She asked me to always look after him if anything happened to her." Edward felt as if the world was spinning. "Peter's mother died 3 years ago, in a car accident." "I know," Anna whispered. "That's why I started watching Peter at school, to keep the promise I made to her." Michael prepared the second shock, but stopped when he heard Anna. "You've been looking after his son all this time?" Anna nodded. "Every morning I stay near the school to see if he's okay. In the afternoon, I stay here at the hospital because I know Mr. Doctor works here. If anything happened to Peter, I was going to tell him." Edward then understood why Anna had managed to enter the hospital so easily. She had done it many times before, always protecting Peter from a distance. A street kid orphaned because of him had dedicated 3 years of her life to protecting his son. "Second shock," Michael announced, applying the defibrillator again. This time, the monitor showed an irregular but present rhythm. Peter was alive, but still in critical condition. "He needs the surgery now," Robert said urgently. "We can't wait any longer." Edward looked at Michael, who was still beside the defibrillator. "Michael, you know the protocol for this type of cardiac emergency better than anyone. Will you help me save my son?" Michael met Edward's eyes for a long moment. Then he looked at Anna, who still held Peter's hand. Finally, he looked at Peter, an innocent child paying for the mistakes of the adults around him. "Anna's right," Michael said finally, his voice breaking. "Beth wouldn't have wanted this. She wouldn't have wanted me to become a murderer because of the pain of losing her." He extended his hand to Edward. I'll help you save your son, but afterward I'll turn myself in to the police for what I did." Edward shook Michael's hand, feeling a mixture of gratitude and regret. "We'll talk about all this later." "Right. Now let's save Peter." Anna let go of Peter's hand and moved to a corner of the room. "I'll stay here in the corner so I don't get in the way, but I'm not leaving until Peter's okay." Edward nodded, preparing for the most important surgery of his life. But before making the first incision, he looked at Anna and said, "Anna, thank you for everything, for protecting Peter all these years, for warning me about the danger, for saving my son even after I failed your mother." Anna just nodded, wiping tears with the back of her dirty hand. Edward took a deep breath, picked up the scalpel, and began to operate on his son. Beside him, Michael Sullivan, the man who had come to destroy his life, now worked as his most dedicated assistant. And in the corner of the room, a 6-year-old girl prayed silently that this time, unlike what had happened to her mother, the medical miracle would arrive in time. The emergency surgery lasted 4 exhausting hours. Edward worked with a concentration he had never experienced before, each movement of the scalpel guided not only by his medical expertise, but by a paternal love that had finally found its purest expression. Beside him, Michael proved to be an exceptional assistant, anticipating every need, every instrument, every procedure. Anna remained in the corner of the room throughout the operation, sitting on a chair Sarah had brought for her. Her eyes never left Peter, as if her constant vigilance could keep him alive through sheer willpower. "Pressure stabilizing," Sarah announced, monitoring Peter's vitals. "The heartbeats are becoming more regular." Edward felt a wave of relief, but didn't allow it to disrupt his concentration. The most delicate part of the surgery was still ahead. He needed to correct the malformation that had caused the arrhythmia, a procedure requiring absolute precision. "Michael, can you see the affected area from here?" Edward asked, shifting slightly to give the ex-nurse a better view of Peter's heart. Michael carefully examined the area. "Yes, doctor. The anomalous connection is clearly visible. It'll be a delicate procedure, but feasible." For the next hour, Edward worked on correcting the cardiac malformation, his hands moving with an artist's precision. Michael assisted him with a competence that reminded Edward why the man had been one of the hospital's best specialized nurses. "Why were you fired, Michael?" Edward asked softly during a less critical moment of the surgery. "Your work today is impeccable." Michael hesitated before answering. "It was after Beth's death. I couldn't concentrate. I made some mistakes. One of them cost a patient's life." His voice was laden with guilt. "I lost my sister, then I lost my job, then I lost custody of Anna to the system." Anna lifted her head from the corner where she sat. "But you didn't really lose me, Uncle Michael. I always ran away from the foster homes to be near you." Edward then understood the extent of the suffering his past choices had caused. He hadn't destroyed just one life, but an entire family. "Mr. Doctor," Anna called softly, "is Peter going to be okay?" Edward looked at her through his surgical mask. "I'll do everything in my power, Anna. I promise." "I know you will," she replied, with a confidence that deeply touched Edward. "You're a very good doctor. My mom always said so." Edward paused for a moment. "Your mother said that?" Anna nodded. "Before she got sick, she always said you were the best heart doctor in the city. She hoped you would agree to operate on her." Anna's words struck Edward like a dagger. Beth had believed in him, had placed her hopes in his medical skill, and he had chosen money and reputation over a human life. "Concentrate, doctor," Michael said softly, noticing Edward's emotion. "Peter needs you now." Edward nodded, returning his full focus to the surgery. But something had changed in him. Every suture, every movement was dedicated not only to saving Peter, but to honoring Beth's memory and correcting the mistake he had made 5 years ago. 2 hours later, Edward finally placed the last suture. "Procedure complete," he announced, exhausted but hopeful. "Let's monitor the cardiac response." The monitor showed regular, strong heartbeats. Peter had overcome the surgery. Anna jumped from her chair and ran towards the table, but stopped respectfully at a safe distance. "Will he wake up now?" "It'll take a few hours," Robert explained gently. "His body needs to recover from the anesthesia and the procedure." Marcus, who had remained discreetly in the room throughout the surgery, approached Michael. "Michael Sullivan, you are under arrest for the crimes of trespassing, sabotage, and making threats." Michael nodded calmly, extending his hands for the handcuffs. "I understand." But Edward intervened. "Marcus, wait a moment." He turned to Michael, removing his surgical mask. "Michael, you just helped me save my son's life. I know this doesn't erase what you did, but it shows who you really are." "Dr. Miller, I committed serious crimes. I need to pay for them." "Yes, you do, but I will testify on your behalf. I'll tell the judge how you abandoned your revenge to save Peter, and I'll do more than that." Edward took a deep breath. "I'm going to create a foundation in Beth's memory, a foundation that will ensure no child dies for lack of resources for cardiac surgery." Anna ran to Michael and hugged him before Marcus could put on the handcuffs. "Uncle Michael, you did the right thing. Mommy would be proud." Michael kissed Anna's forehead, tears streaming down his face. "Take care of Peter for me, little one, and let's forgive your uncle for being so foolish." As Marcus led Michael away, Edward knelt beside Anna. "Anna, do you have anywhere to stay?" Anna shook her head. "The children's home, but I always run away from there." Edward looked at Peter, sleeping peacefully on the operating table, then at Anna, who had risked everything to save his son. "Anna, would you like to stay here at the hospital with me while Peter recovers? And then we can talk about you becoming part of our family for real." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "Can I really stay with you? You saved my son, Anna. More than that, you taught me what it truly means to be a doctor." Edward smiled through his own tears. "Of course, you can stay with us." Anna hugged Edward tightly, and for the first time in years, he felt he had found not only forgiveness, but a chance for true redemption. 3 days had passed since the surgery. Peter had awakened from anesthesia the previous day, weak but conscious, and at first glance, instinctively sought out his father. Edward hadn't left the ICU room since, watching his son's every breath, as if he could protect him with his mere presence. Anna hadn't strayed far either. She had slept in an armchair beside Peter's bed, and during the day she chatted quietly with him, telling stories from the street and making him smile even amidst the tubes and monitors that still surrounded him. "Dad," Peter whispered that morning, his voice still hoarse from intubation. "Who's the girl who stays here with me?" Edward looked at Anna, who was organizing some drawings she had made to decorate the room. "This is Anna, son, a very special friend who helped us a lot." Peter tried to turn to see Anna better. "Hi, Anna. Dad said you helped me." Anna shyly approached the bed. "Hi, Peter. How are you feeling?" "Better, but it still hurts a little." "To breathe," Peter smiled weakly. "Do you want to be my real friend?" "I've been your friend for a long time," Anna replied, gently holding his hand. "You just didn't know it." Edward watched the interaction between the two children and felt an emotion he couldn't name. It was as if he were seeing his family form before his eyes in a way he had never imagined possible. Dr. Evans entered the room for the morning checkup. "How's our patient today?" "Better," Edward replied, Vitals have been stable for 24 hours. Sarah examined Peter carefully, checking the surgical incision and listening to his heart with her stethoscope. His recovery is exceptional, Edward. In a few more days, he can go home. Home, Peter repeated dreamily. Then he looked at Anna. Is Anna going to live with us? Edward and Anna exchanged glances. They had talked about it the night before, but weren't yet sure how to proceed legally. Anna will stay with us for as long as she wants, Edward said softly. But first, we need to sort out some important things. At that moment, Marcus entered, the room accompanied by a woman Edward didn't know. Dr. Miller, this is social worker Carla Mendez. She needs to talk to you about Anna's situation. Carla approached with a gentle smile. Dr. Miller, I understand you're interested in taking custody of Anna, is that correct? Yes, Anna has no family left except for Michael, who is unavailable at the moment. She saved my son's life, and more than that, she needs a family. Carla nodded, consulting her notes. The situation is a bit complex. Anna has a history of running away from foster homes. She always returns to the streets. Because she was protecting Peter, Edward explained, and looking for Michael. Now she has a reason to stay. Anna approached Carla. Mom, I promise I'll be a good girl if I can stay with Mr. Edward and Peter. I won't run away ever again. Carla knelt to Anna's level. Why do you want to stay with them, dear? Anna looked at Peter in the bed, then at Edward. Because here, I have a real family. Mr. Edward treats me like a daughter. And Peter is like the little brother I always wanted. Little brother, Peter protested with a weak smile. I'm older than you. Doesn't matter, Anna laughed. I'm the one who takes care of you. Edward felt his heart tighten with emotion. Carla, I'll do whatever is necessary to legally adopt Anna. She deserves to have a family that loves her. Carla smiled. I'll start the process, Dr. Miller. But I need to inform you, it will be a thorough evaluation. We'll visit your home, analyze your financial situation, your personal history, do all the necessary checks, Edward replied without hesitation. Anna is worth any process. Peter tried to sit up better in bed. Dad, does this mean Anna is going to be my real sister? If everything goes well and if Anna wants to, yes. Anna ran to Peter's bedside. I do. I've always wanted a brother. So when I get out of the hospital, we can play together every day. Every day, Anna promised. Edward watched the joy of the two children and understood that his life had completely changed. He was no longer just a successful surgeon and a single father. He was about to become a father to two children who had found each other under the most unlikely circumstances. Carla stood up. Dr. Miller, there's one more thing. I heard you plan to create a foundation in memory of Anna's mother. Yes, the Beth Sullivan Foundation. It will be dedicated to providing free cardiac surgeries for underprivileged children. And Michael Sullivan, what's his situation? Edward sighed. He's in jail, awaiting trial. But I will testify on his behalf. What he did was wrong, but he was also a victim of circumstance, and in the end, he chose to do the right thing. Anna was quiet for a moment. Mr. Edward, when Uncle Michael gets out of jail, can he visit us? Edward hesitated. The question was complicated, but looking at Anna, he understood she still loved her uncle, despite everything. If the judge allows it, and if Michael can rehabilitate himself, yes, he's still your family, Anna. Anna smiled, relieved. Thank you, Mr. Edward. Carla headed for the door. I'll be in touch to start the adoption process, but from the way I see you all together, I believe it will be successful. After everyone had left, Edward sat between the two beds, Peter in the hospital bed and Anna in the armchair that had become her makeshift bed. "You know something?" he said, smiling at them both. "I think I've finally discovered what it truly means to be rich." "What is it, Dad?" Peter asked. Edward looked at Anna, then at Peter. "It's having a family that truly loves each other, and now I'm the richest man in the world." A week after the surgery, Peter was finally discharged from the hospital. Edward had completely transformed his routine, cancelling non-urgent surgeries, transferring complex cases to colleagues, and reorganizing his schedule to be present for his son's recovery. It was the first time in 8 years he had prioritized family over work. Anna had accompanied the entire discharge process, helping Peter walk through the hospital corridors during physical therapy and organizing his personal belongings with the care of an older sister. Despite being 2 years younger, she displayed a protective maturity that deeply touched Edward. "Dad, can I show Anna my room?" Peter asked as soon as they arrived home, an elegant mansion in an upscale neighborhood that Anna observed with wide eyes. "Of course, son, but take it slow. Remember the doctor's recommendations." Anna held Peter's arm as they climbed the stairs, ensuring he didn't overexert himself. Edward watched them, noticing how naturally they had assumed the roles of caring for each other. Peter's room was large, with a single bed, a desk, shelves full of books and toys, and a large window overlooking the garden. Anna stood at the door, as if she didn't feel comfortable entering. "You can come in, Anna," Peter said, pulling her by the hand. "This is your home too now?" Anna entered timidly, her bare feet sinking into the soft carpet. "It's very beautiful, Peter. You're lucky." Edward appeared at the door. "Anna, come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to the room next door, which he had always used as a home office. But now it was completely transformed. There was a new bed with pink sheets, a small dresser, a desk perfectly sized for a child, and empty shelves waiting to be filled. "This is your room, Anna," Edward said softly. "If you like it, of course." Anna stood frozen in the doorway, her hands trembling slightly. "My room? For real?" "For real. I thought you'd like to have your own space, but right next to Peter's." Anna entered slowly, gently touching the bed, the desk, the new curtains. "I've never had a room of my own," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Peter leaned against the doorframe. "Anna, if you want, we could put a hole in the wall to connect our rooms, like in the movies," Peter suggested excitedly. Edward laughed. "Maybe not a hole, Peter, but we can always leave the doors open." Anna sat on the new bed, testing the softness of the mattress. "Mr. Edward, are you sure I can stay here? It's not just until I get better." Edward sat beside her on the bed. "Anna, you saved my son. More than that, you taught me things I had forgotten about being human. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." "Forever?" Anna asked hopefully. "Forever," Edward confirmed. That evening, during dinner, Edward watched Anna eat slowly, savoring each mouthful as if it were the most special meal of her life. It probably was. How long had it been since she'd had a complete hot meal at a real table? "Anna," Edward said as they served dessert, "tomorrow we're going shopping. You need new clothes, shoes, school supplies." "School supplies?" Anna interrupted, surprised. "Of course, you're going to go to the same school as Peter. I've already spoken with the principal." Anna was silent for a moment. "I can't read." "Very well," she admitted, embarrassed. Peter immediately perked up. "I can teach you. I'm a great reader. And I'll hire a tutor to help you catch up with the other kids your age," Edward added. "You're very smart, Anna. You just need the opportunity." After dinner, Edward was organizing some papers in his study when Anna appeared at the door, already wearing the new pajamas he had bought for her. "Uncle Edward, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetie. You can ask anything." Anna approached, fiddling nervously with her hands. Are you going to visit Uncle Michael in jail? Edward sighed. It was a question he knew would come eventually. Would you like me to visit him? I would. He's the only family I have left from my mom, and even though he did bad things, he always took care of me when he could. Edward understood that for Anna, love wasn't something cancelled out by mistakes. It was something that persisted despite them. Then we'll visit him next weekend, Edward decided, and I'll talk to my lawyer about how we can help him. Anna ran to hug him. Thank you, Uncle Edward. You're the kindest man in the world. Edward hugged her back, feeling an emotion he couldn't quite name. Anna, you're the one who taught me how to be a better person. That night, after both children were asleep, Edward stood in the garden looking at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt his life had a purpose. Greater than just his medical career. He had a family to care for, a foundation to build, and most importantly, he had the chance to honor Beth's memory by being the kind of person she had hoped he would be. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Sarah. Edward, sorry to call so late, but an emergency case just came into the hospital. A 7-year-old girl with a complex heart problem. The family can't afford private surgery. Edward didn't hesitate for a second. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Sarah, this surgery is on the Beth Sullivan Foundation, the first of many. As he prepared to leave, Edward passed by the children's rooms. Peter slept peacefully, his breathing regular and healthy. Anna was awake, reading one of Peter's books with difficulty, but with determination. Where are you going, Uncle Edward? She asked. To the hospital. There's a little girl who needs surgery, just like you needed my help with Peter. Anna smiled. You're going to save her, right? I'll do everything I can, Edward promised, just like you did with Peter. And not like you did with Mommy, but now you've learned to do it differently. Edward bent down and kissed Anna's forehead. That's right, little one. Now I've learned to do it differently. And for the first time in 5 years, Edward left for a surgery feeling he was honoring not only his profession, but also the memory of Beth Sullivan and the love of a little girl who had taught him the true meaning of medicine. Saturday arrived grey and rainy, but Anna woke up excited. It was the day to visit Michael at the correctional facility. She had spent the whole week choosing what to bring her uncle. Drawings she'd made, a letter Peter had helped her write, and a photo of their new family taken in the backyard. Edward watched Anna prepare with a mixture of admiration and concern. The girl had adapted surprisingly well to her new life, but he knew seeing Michael behind bars would be difficult for her. Uncle Edward, Anna asked as she combed her hair. Now, clean and professionally cut, is Uncle Michael going to be in prison for a long time? Edward knelt beside her, adjusting a barrette in her hair. I don't know for sure, sweetie. It depends on what the judge decides, but I'll do everything I can to help him. Peter, still recovering but insistent on accompanying them, came slowly down the stairs. Anna, do you want me to tell Uncle Michael that he saved my life? Anna nodded vigorously. Yes, I think it will make him feel better. The drive to the correctional facility was quiet. Edward drove, lost in thought about what it would be like to face Michael again. Over the past 2 weeks, he had reflected deeply on his past choices and how a single no had destroyed so many lives. The facility was a grey, imposing building that contrasted with the delicacy of the children Edward had with him. During the security check and identification process, Anna held tightly to Edward's hand, showing nervousness for the first time since leaving the hospital. It's okay, little one, Edward whispered. We're here to show Uncle Michael we still love him. When Michael entered the visiting room, Edward almost didn't recognize him. The man was thinner, unshaven, and his expression was heavy with sadness. But his eyes lit up completely when he saw Anna. "Anna, my little girl," Michael exclaimed, rushing to hug her across the table that separated them. Anna started crying immediately. "Uncle Michael, I missed you so much." "I missed you too, little one. How are you? Are they treating you well?" Anna wiped her tears and smiled. "I'm great. Uncle Edward gave me my own room and Peter is my brother now. Look." She showed him the family photo. Michael looked at the photo with tears in his eyes, then at Edward. "Dr. Miller, I don't know how to thank you for taking care of her." "No need to thank me, Michael. Anna has taught me more about being a father and a doctor in the last 2 weeks than I've learned in my entire life." Peter approached timidly. "Uncle Michael, thank you for saving my life. Dad told me you helped with the surgery." Michael held Peter's small hand. "Peter, I almost made a terrible mistake. Can you forgive me?" "I already forgave you," Peter replied simply. "Anna said good people sometimes do bad things when their hearts are hurting a lot." Edward observed the children's wisdom and understood. They had processed this complex situation much more healthily than the adults. "Michael," Edward said, "I spoke with my lawyer. He believes that with the mitigating circumstances, your exemplary record, your emotional state, and especially the fact that you helped save Peter, you might get a reduced sentence and serve part of it in a work release program." Michael shook his head. "Dr. Miller, you don't have to do this for me. I'm not just doing it for you. I'm doing it for Anna, who needs the family she has left. And I'm doing it for myself too, because I've understood that everyone deserves a second chance." Anna took the drawings out of her bag. "Uncle Michael, I made these drawings to decorate your room here. This is me, you, Uncle Edward, and Peter. We're a family now." Michael held the drawings as if they were treasures. "Anna, are you sure you want me to be part of the family even after what I did?" "I'm sure. Real families stick together even when someone messes up." Edward felt a lump in his throat. A 6-year-old girl was teaching him lessons about forgiveness and unconditional love that he would carry for the rest of his life. "Michael," Edward said, "when you get out of here, there's a place waiting for you at the Beth Sullivan Foundation. I want you to help me ensure no child goes through what Anna went through." Michael looked surprised. "You'd hire me after all this?" "You know the pain of losing someone due to lack of medical resources better than anyone. That makes you the ideal person to help other families." The visit ended too quickly. Anna hugged Michael with all her might, promising to return the following week. Peter shook his hand like a little man, and Edward simply said, "Take care, Michael. We have a lot of work ahead of us when you get out." On the way back, Anna was visibly lighter. Uncle Edward, Uncle Michael seemed happier at the end of the visit. "I think he understood he's not alone," Edward replied, "that he has a family waiting for him." Peter, sleepy in the back seat, murmured, "Dad, our family is different from other families, isn't it?" Edward smiled, looking in the rearview mirror at the 2 children who had transformed his life. "It is, son. Our family is made of love, forgiveness, and second chances, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." Anna held Peter's hand and sighed contentedly. "Mommy would be happy to see how big and full of love our family has become," Edward agreed silently, driving home under the rain that was finally beginning to stop, giving way to the first rays of the afternoon sun. 2 weeks after the visit to the correctional facility, Edward was awakened at 3 in the morning by an urgent call. It was Sarah, her voice tense and worried. "Edward, you need to come to the hospital immediately. We have a critical situation." Edward sat up in bed, instantly alert. What happened? A 5-year-old girl arrived in critical condition. Complex Heart disease, multiple malformations. The family came from far away because they heard about the Beth Sullivan Foundation. Edward, it's exactly the same type of case as Michael's sister. Edward felt his stomach clench. How much time do we have? Hours, maybe less. The child is deteriorating rapidly. Edward got up quickly but hesitated. Peter and Anna slept peacefully in their rooms. In recent weeks, he had promised to always be present, to always prioritize family. Sarah, I need to bring the children. I can't leave them alone, and I don't want to break my promise to always be available for them. Of course, Edward, bring them. They can stay in my office while you operate. Edward gently woke Peter and Anna. Kids, we need to go to the hospital. There's a little girl who needs urgent surgery. Anna sat up in bed immediately, completely. Awake? Is she a girl like my mom was? Yes, sweetie, exactly like your mom. Anna jumped out of bed and started dressing quickly. Then let's go save her, Uncle Edward. Peter, still sleepy but understanding the urgency, also got ready. Dad, you're going to be able to save her, right? Edward hugged them both. I'll do everything in my power. At the hospital, Edward went straight to the pediatric ICU, where he found a scene that transported him 5 years back in time. A small, fragile girl was connected to multiple machines, her breathing labored and irregular. Beside her, a young woman held her hand, tears streaming silently down her face. Dr. Evans, the woman said upon seeing them approach, is this Dr. Miller who will operate on my Isabella? Edward approached the bed, observing the monitors and test results. The case was even more complex than Beth's had been 5 years ago. Yes, I'm Dr. Miller. What's your daughter's full name? Isabella Sanchez. She just turned 5. The mother wiped her tears. Doctor, we don't have any money to pay, but when we heard about the foundation... Mrs. Sanchez, Edward interrupted her gently, your daughter will be operated on. That's what the Beth Sullivan Foundation exists for. Anna, who had been watching from the doorway, approached timidly. Can I talk to Isabella? Edward looked at the girl's mother, who nodded. Anna approached the bed and gently held Isabella's hand. Hi, Isabella. I'm Anna. Uncle Edward is the best doctor in the world. He saved my brother Peter, and now he's going to save you too. Isabella opened her eyes weakly and whispered, I'm scared. I know you are, Anna replied tenderly. My mommy was scared too when she got sick. But you know what? Uncle Edward learned to be an even better doctor after my mommy went to heaven. He won't let you go either. Edward felt tears welling in his eyes. Anna was giving Isabella the hope Beth had never received from him. Anna's right, Edward said, kneeling beside the bed. Isabella, I'm going to take care of you as I would my own daughter. Over the next few hours, Edward prepared for the most important surgery of his career. It wasn't technically more complex than others he had performed, but emotionally it represented his final chance at redemption. Peter and Anna stayed in Sarah's office, but from time to time they appeared at the operating room door to wave through the glass. Edward could see them, and their presence gave him a strength he had never felt before. Doctor, Sarah said during the operation, you're operating brilliantly. I've never seen such precise technique. Edward smiled beneath his surgical mask. It's because this time I'm not operating alone. I have Beth's memory guiding me and Anna's love giving me strength. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Every suture, every movement was dedicated not only to saving Isabella, but to honoring all the children he could have saved but didn't. When he finally finished, Isabella was stable. Her vital signs were strong, her breathing regular. The surgery had been a complete success. Edward left the operating room exhausted, but triumphant. Anna and Peter ran to hug him. Did you do it, Uncle Edward? Anna asked eagerly. We did it, sweetie. Isabella is going to be fine. Anna hugged Edward tightly. "Mommy would be proud. You saved a girl just like her." At that moment, Edward understood he had completed a cycle. 5 years ago, his coldness and ambition had led to Beth Sullivan's death. Today, his love and dedication had saved Isabella Sanchez. "Dad," Peter said, "now you're the doctor you always should have been, right?" Edward looked at his two children, because Anna was already his daughter in every sense that mattered, and nodded. "Now I'm the doctor your mother, Anna, always believed I could be." Anna smiled through her tears, "And now no more children will die like my mommy did." Edward lifted her into his arms, hugging her and Peter together. "Never again, my little one. This is my promise to you, to your mother, and to all the children we are yet to save." The sun was rising when they finally left the hospital, and Edward knew it was the beginning not just of a new day, but of a new life. 3 months after Isabella's surgery, Edward was in his study organizing the final adoption papers for Anna, when he received a call that would definitively change the course of their lives. "Dr. Miller," the lawyer said, "I have good news. Michael Sullivan has been approved for a work release program. He'll be able to work during the day and return to the correctional facility only to sleep." Edward smiled, imagining Anna's joy at hearing the news. "And the job offer at the foundation?" "Approved by the judge. Michael can start next week, provided he's supervised for the first 6 months." That afternoon, when Anna and Peter returned from school, Edward called them for a chat in the garden. Anna's adjustment to school had been challenging at first. She had learning gaps and difficulty trusting her classmates, but with Peter's support and a dedicated tutor, she was progressing rapidly. "Kids, I have some important news," Edward began, watching them sit side by side on the garden bench. Peter automatically holding Anna's hand in a protective gesture that had become natural between them. "Is it about Uncle Michael?" Anna asked hopefully. "Yes. He'll be able to leave the prison during the day to work at the Beth Sullivan Foundation." Anna shouted with joy and hugged Edward. "Really? Will he be able to come have dinner with us sometimes?" "On Sundays," Edward confirmed, "and he'll help other families like yours, so no child goes through what you went through." Peter, who had become surprisingly mature since his surgery, asked a question that surprised Edward. "Dad, have you completely forgiven Uncle Michael?" Edward paused, reflecting on his 8-year-old son's profound question. "You know, Peter, forgiveness was a process. At first I was very angry and scared, but Anna taught me that sometimes people do bad things when their hearts are broken, and Michael proved he's a good person when he chose to save you." Anna snuggled into Edward's. "Uncle Edward, can I ask something about my mom?" "Of course, sweetie, you can ask anything." "Do you feel guilty for not saving her?" The question hit Edward like a punch to the stomach, but he had learned to be honest with the children about difficult subjects. "I do, Anna. I feel it very much. It was the biggest mistake of my life." Anna was quiet for a moment, then looked into his eyes. "Uncle Edward, my mom once told me that mistakes are only really bad if we don't learn anything from them. You learned, didn't you?" Edward hugged Anna tighter. "I learned, little one. I learned that being a doctor isn't just about technique or money. It's about saving lives because every life is precious." "So my mom didn't die for nothing," Anna said with a wisdom that moved Edward. "She died so you could learn to save other children." That weekend, they visited Michael one last time at the correctional facility to give him the news personally. The man cried when he learned he could work at the foundation dedicated to his sister's memory. "Dr. Miller," Michael said, "how can I thank you for this opportunity?" "By helping other families have hope," Edward replied, "and by being the uncle Anna deserves. The following Sunday, Michael had dinner with them for the first time as a man free during the day. Anna had prepared a special drawing for him. The whole family gathered around a table, including a female figure floating above them like an angel. "This is my mom," Anna explained, "watching over all of us from heaven." Michael held the drawing, with tears in his eyes. "Anna, your mother would be so proud of the brave girl you've become." During dinner, Edward made an announcement he had carefully planned. "I want to share some news with you all. The Beth Sullivan Foundation has just received approval to build a pediatric hospital specializing in free cardiac surgeries." "A whole hospital?" Peter asked, impressed. "A whole hospital? And do you know what its name will be?" Edward smiled. "The Anna Page Sullivan Miller Children's Hospital." Anna's jaw dropped. "My name will be on a hospital. Your name and your mother's, and my name. Because you two taught me the true meaning of being a doctor." Michael shook Edward's hand across the table. "Doctor, there are no words to thank you for what you've done for our family." "Michael, we're all one family now, and families help each other." That night, after Michael left to return to the facility and the children went to sleep, Edward stood in the garden looking at the stars. He felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. Anna appeared at the door, wearing her favorite pajamas. "Uncle Edward, I can't sleep." "Come here, sweetie." Anna sat on his lap and they watched the starry sky together. "Uncle Edward, do you think my mum can see us from up here?" Edward looked at the girl who had completely transformed his life. "I'm sure she can, Anna, and I'm sure she's very proud of the brave daughter she raised." Anna sighed contentedly, snuggling into Edward's chest. "I love our family, Uncle Edward." "I love our family too, my little one. And do you know why? Why? Because it was made from love, forgiveness, and second chances. And that makes it the most special family in the world." Anna fell asleep in Edward's lap under the stars, and he understood that he had finally found not only redemption for past mistakes, but a happiness he never knew was possible. 1 year after that terrible night in the operating room, Edward awoke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. Through his bedroom window, he saw Peter and Anna playing on the swing set he had installed especially for her, their laughter echoing through the sunny morning like music to his ears. Peter, now 9 years old and fully recovered from his surgery, chased Anna with the typical energy of a healthy child. Anna, who had grown a few inches and gained weight, looked like a completely different girl from the frightened little creature who had burst into the operating room a year ago. "Good morning, Dad!" Peter shouted when he saw him at the window. Anna woke up early to finish her school project. Edward smiled. Anna had become an exemplary student, her natural intelligence blossoming with the right educational support. She still preferred to be called Anna Page Sullivan Miller. She had insisted on keeping her mother's surname, along with her new adoptive family's name. Going down to the kitchen, Edward found Anna concentrated at the table, gluing photos onto a colorful poster. The project was about everyday heroes, and she had chosen to do it about doctors who save underprivileged children. "Good morning, my little one," Edward said, kissing the top of her head. "How's the project coming along?" Anna held up the poster proudly. "Look, I put a picture of you operating, a picture of Uncle Michael helping a family at the hospital, and here's a picture of Isabella playing with her siblings." Edward observed Anna's careful work. Isabella Sanchez, the girl he had operated on at his moment of redemption, had become one of Anna's best friends. The two families met regularly, and the girls often played together at the hospital during follow-up visits. "And this picture here," Edward asked, pointing to an image in the center of the poster. "This is my mom," Anna replied softly. The teacher said I can include her because she's a hero too. She taught me to be brave and to always try to help people. Edward felt a familiar emotion, a mixture of love, pride, and a twinge of sadness for the woman he had never properly known, but whose daughter had transformed his life. Your mom would be very proud of this project, Anna. I know, Anna smiled. Sometimes I talk to her before I go to sleep, and I tell her how happy our family is. Peter ran in through the kitchen door. Dad, you didn't forget today is the hospital's grand opening, did you? How could he forget? After a year of planning and construction, the Anna Page Sullivan Miller Children's Hospital would be inaugurated that afternoon. It would be the first pediatric hospital in the region dedicated exclusively to free cardiac surgeries. I didn't forget, son. In fact, I have a surprise for you and Anna. The two children approached curiously. Michael gets to cut the ribbon with us. The judge gave special permission. Anna shouted with joy and hugged Edward. In recent months, Michael had become an exemplary employee of the foundation, helping families in need navigate the healthcare system and offering emotional support based on his own experience of loss. That afternoon, hundreds of people gathered for the hospital's grand opening. Edward, wearing his best suit, watched the crowd with an emotion he could barely contain. In the front row were the families the Beth Sullivan Foundation had already helped. Isabella Sanchez waved enthusiastically at Anna, wearing a new dress and with her cheeks rosy with health. Beside her, 23 other children who had received free surgeries in the past year. When it was time for speeches, Edward approached the microphone with Anna and Peter by his side, and Michael just behind them. A year ago, Edward began, his voice clear and emotional, a small, brave girl came into my life shouting, "Don't start the surgery." Yet at that moment, I thought she was disrupting the most important work of my career. Today, I know she was teaching me what the most important work of my life truly was. He looked at Anna, who smiled shyly at the crowd. This hospital exists because Anna taught me that medicine isn't about money or prestige. It's about love, compassion, and the fundamental belief that every life has immeasurable value. Edward paused, looking at Michael. This hospital also exists because a man named Michael Sullivan showed me that even our biggest mistakes can turn into opportunities to do good if we have the courage to accept a second chance. Michael wiped away a tear, nodding in acknowledgement. But, mainly, Edward continued, this hospital exists in memory of Beth Sullivan, a woman I failed to save, but whose daughter saved me from a life without purpose. Anna held Edward's hand as he concluded. May this hospital be a symbol that it's never too late to do the right thing, and that sometimes the greatest lessons come from those society chooses to ignore. When they cut the inaugural ribbon, Anna whispered in Edward's ear, "Mommy's watching, right?" Edward lifted her into his arms, hugging her tightly. "She's watching and she's proud, my little one." That night, after the opening party, the family gathered in their backyard. Peter dozed in Edward's lap, exhausted from the day's excitement. Anna sat on the grass, looking at the stars. "Uncle Edward," she said softly, "do you think we saved a lot of children this year?" "We saved 24 children, sweetie, and we're going to save many more. And do you think that makes my mom happy?" Edward looked at the girl who had been a miracle in his life. "Anna, I'm sure your mother is happier than she ever imagined." "She could be," Anna sighed contentedly. Then it was worth shouting, "Don't start the surgery that day." Edward laughed softly. "It was very much worth it, my brave girl, very much worth it." And there, under the stars that had witnessed his transformation, Edward understood he had found not only a family, but a purpose. The man who had once prioritized wealth and recognition now measured his success by the number of children's smiles he managed to preserve. The operating room, once a temple of cold technicality, had become a sanctuary of hope. And in the garden of his home, a girl who lost her mother because of him had become the daughter he never knew he needed. The circle was complete. Redemption had arrived through the small hands of a brave child who dared to shout when all the adults had failed to see the danger. And now, with each new morning, Edward awoke knowing his life had the deepest possible meaning: to protect and save the world's children, one surgery at a time, one family at a time, one act of love at a time.